Hello and welcome to the Past Functional Skills video solutions for the Open Awards Level 2 reading paper. Before watching this video, make sure that you have read the 3 texts in the insert and you have attempted to complete the paper yourself. Question 1. Text 1 refers to greenwashing. Write a definition of this term and indicate 2 ways it can emerge in the fashion industry. Okay, this is quite a tricky question and we have 3 marks for this question. So we get 1 mark for correctly identifying what greenwashing is and writing an appropriate definition of the term. And then we get 2 marks for indicating 2 ways that greenwashing can emerge in the fashion industry. So we want to use text 1 to find out what greenwashing means. So let's scan the text looking for this word. So greenwashing is mentioned in the title, and then we have an explanation of what greenwashing is. So we have, this is circularity as greenwashing, says Andrew Morgan. So we know that greenwashing has been mentioned here, so what exactly does it mean? Well, if we read the paragraph, we see that while some of the clothing is mended or upcycled, much of it is of too poor quality to reuse or has been thoughtlessly constructed with embellishments and extra fastenings that render the garments useless. So some of the things that greenwashing does, it involves using clothing that is too poor quality to reuse and useless garments with extra fastenings and things on. Clothes sent to Cantamanto are often recorded as being recycled, but 40% leave the market again as landfill. So these are clothes that are being claimed to be recycled, but a lot of them end up in landfill. So Livia Firth says that circularity becomes a marketing tool which allows big brands to put a recycling bin in their store while continuing to use supply chains that wreak havoc on the natural world. So we see a theme here developing and we can begin to understand what greenwashing means. So it's when companies, big brands, are saying that they are recycling while they are actually causing damage to the environment. They are wreaking havoc on the natural world. We've also got this quote here that says, there is this idea that plastic is infinitely recyclable, and that is just not the case. So customers are being misled about how sustainable this fashion is. So let's take a look at the answer to this question. So first of all, we need a definition of greenwashing, and we've got that here. Greenwashing is creating a false impression of environmentally friendly, sustainable practices. So we know from the inferences that we made from the document that that is the definition. And then we've indicated 2 ways that it can emerge in the fashion industry. So we saw that clothes can be non-recyclable due to poor quality materials that have been used to make them. And customers have been misled about just how recyclable materials such as plastics are. So when you're presented with a question like this, you need to find the appropriate word in the document and then infer its meaning based on the context. So what has been written about it and how is it being presented? How can it emerge in the fashion industry in this case? Make sure that you are writing 3 separate sentences to ensure that you gain the 3 marks and you are using evidence from the text in your answer. Question 2. In text 1, Jess Cartner-Morley writes, the fashion industry should capitalise upon high-spending consumers' interest in sustainability to fund research into future regenerative fabrics. Is this a fact or opinion? Explain your answer. So we need to look at this quotation from text 1 and decide whether it's a fact or an opinion. And we need to offer an explanation for our answer. So the question is worth 3 marks overall. So we're going to get 1 mark for deciding whether it's a fact or opinion and 2 marks for the explanation. So what is a fact? Well, it is something that can be proven or verified. So it's something that you can find to be true and you can't disagree with it. Whereas an opinion is a thought, feeling, or a belief. So, is this a fact or an opinion? The fashion industry should capitalise upon high spending consumers' interest. Well, we know that this is an opinion. How do we know this? Well, it's somebody's thought, it's their feeling, their belief. Because we've got this modal verb should, that indicates that they are giving an opinion here. They're giving their thoughts on the topic. And we can disagree with this. We could say that maybe the fashion industry should look at the sustainability, and instead of funding research into regenerative fabrics, they could fund some other kind of research. We could say that, well, they don't need to fund any research at all. Their goal is to just make money. So overall, we know that this is an opinion and we need to give an explanation for this. So this student has given a fantastic explanation. They've stated that it is an opinion, so they've got the first mark. And then they've said that the modal verb should indicates that it is a possibility Cardiani wants people to accept rather than a concrete fact that can be proven. So they've mentioned the modal verb that has been mentioned here, and they have shown that this is a possibility that the person wants people to accept, and it's not a concrete fact because it cannot be proven. So we're going to get 2 marks for a good explanation, identifying that the modal verb should is being used to show that it is simply a possibility rather than something that can be proven. Question 3. Text 2 indicates several questions. Explain why these are beneficial for the text. So in this question, we want to address text 2, and we want to be scanning the text, looking for question marks, because the question here is focusing on the questions in the text. We then have to explain why these are beneficial for the text. So what effect are they creating on the reader? How are they helping to address the aims of the text? And we're getting 2 marks here, so we need to provide at least 2 points to explain why these are beneficial. So let's have a look in the text and see how the questions are being used. So in this text, we have a question and answer structure. So we've got questions like, where does my pizza box fit, being asked within the text, and then we have an answer underneath. So this helps to inform the reader and provide them with information in an immediate and interactive way. So that is one way that questions are being used. We've also got rhetorical questions, so questions that don't really need an answer. So, for example, we have, are we dealing with it in the right way? That is a rhetorical question, and this creates a sense of dialogue with the reader, because they're drawing the reader in and saying, are we dealing with it in the right way, bringing them into the text and encouraging them to engage with the text. What other questions can we see, and what are they being used for? Well, we have a question right at the top here. Can I recycle a pizza box? We ask the expert. So that is the title here, and it's introducing what this text is going to be about. So the answer to this question, rhetorical questions are creating a sense of dialogue with the reader. Questions indicate the style of the text as a question and answer format. And this question and answer format is also giving the reader information in an interactive way that makes the text more engaging. So this student will get 2 marks for correctly identifying the purpose of questions within the text. Question 4. The purpose of text 2 is to inform. Give 2 examples from the text which help to support this statement. So here we are looking at text 2 and we are considering its purpose. And this person has said that the purpose is to inform, so to provide information. So when we're looking for an informative text, we want to look for any facts, any statistics or quotations from experts that will inform the reader, provide them with some information. And we want to give 2 examples from the text which support this. So we want to be providing some quotations, and we might also look for techniques in the text, such as facts. So we can see that the student here has identified that specialist vocabulary, such as the circular economy, is used to inform the reader. So specialist vocabulary is one technique, and then they've given a valid example of this, so the circular economy. And this informs the reader. And then the question and answer format presented by questions like, is it a problem? Followed by answers like, it's a big issue, is informative. So if we look at the text, we can see that we have these questions and answers. So we're asking questions that the reader might be interested in, and then we are getting answers from an expert. So in this case, that expert is Adam Herriot, who is a resource management specialist. So the reader is being informed by these questions that are followed by answers. And we have some valid examples from the text here. So is it a problem and it's a big issue. So try to identify some textual features to support your answers and make sure that you are finding some relevant examples of these. You could also answer this question by saying that facts and statistics are being used, and then you could give an example from the text. So we can see that we've got some statistics like, I was a recycling manager at a place where materials are separated and our rejection rate was about 9% of vehicle loads. So that's a statistic there from an expert on the topic. Question 5. Identify 2 linguistic features used by the author of text 3. For each feature, explain the effect these have on how the reader interprets the text. So this might sound like a tricky question, but really, when we break it down, it's not too bad. So we need to find 2 linguistic features. So this means language features. So you're looking for anything like idioms, similes, metaphors, alliteration, rule of 3, rhetorical questions, that kind of thing. You've got lots of different options to consider here. You want to look pretty much for anything that is to do with the way things are worded within the text to create an effect on the reader. We're looking for these in text 3, and we want to explain the effects that these are creating on how the reader interprets the text. So what is the feature making the reader think about? How is the feature making the reader feel? And we have 4 marks for this question. So 2 marks for correctly identifying 2 linguistic features and 2 marks for explaining the effects of each of these. So when you're thinking about the effect, you want to look at the place that the linguistic feature is placed in within the text and think about how it makes you think and feel. So we have rhetorical questions like, what do we propose? Creates a sense of dialogue that makes the reader feel involved and leads them to question their own views on the topic. So here we've identified the first linguistic feature, rhetorical questions, so we get 1 mark. Then we've given an explanation. including a quotation from the text. So it's a really great idea to try and use examples from the text to support all of your points. So here we have what do we propose, and this is creating a sense of dialogue, and it makes the reader feel involved. It leads them to question their own views on the topic. So we've explained a variety of effects that this has on the reader. Think about how these rhetorical questions are making you respond to the text, because this will really help you to think about how the other readers might respond as well. And then we have imperatives like look and adopt are repeated throughout the text to make the author seem like an authority figure on the subject, as well as simplifying the text into tasks that make the information seem less complex and more memorable. So we have imperatives, so these are command words. And again, we have some examples from the text. So we've got the quotations look and adopt. And these are repeated, so we've got some repetition as well. So we've actually identified a third linguistic feature there. And these are repeated throughout the text to make the author seem like an authority figure on the subject. So if someone's telling you what to do, then it seems like they have the authority, they know what they're doing, and they can instruct other people. And this also simplifies the text into tasks. So here we have 2 language features that have been identified for 2 marks, and then we have great explanations of their effects, including some examples from the text for the full 4 marks. Question 6. Identify the most significant reason why Brumgovner, the author of text 3, supports Birmingham abandoning waste incineration. Explain your answer using an example from the text. So here we need to look at text 3 and identify why the author is supporting the abandonment of waste incineration. So why should Birmingham stop incinerating, burning their waste? And we need to find the most significant reason. So we need to identify the most important reason there. So let's scan through the text and look for any mentions of waste incineration. So we are told here that the first measure that needs to be taken is to abandon incineration. The Tyseley incinerator is swallowing up over 2/3 of all the waste in Birmingham and is the biggest single contributor to CO2 emissions in the city. Until we close this dirty, outdated burner down, we will never reach the goal of 70% of waste being recycled or get the city's CO2 emissions down to net zero. So here, Brumgovner is telling us that we should abandon incineration. And they've given an explanation as to why. So they've said that it's currently burning 2/3 of all the waste in Birmingham. And then we've got the fact that it is the biggest single contributor to CO2 emissions in the city. So we need to get these CO2 emissions down to net zero, and this incineration is really hindering this process. It's really bad for the environment in terms of emissions. And the goal is to get 70% of waste being recycled rather than incinerated. So we've got some of the main reasons spoken about there. So the answer to this question, the author supports the abandonment of waste incineration in Birmingham because with the incinerator, the city will struggle to reduce the CO2 emissions to net zero. So that is one significant reason why Birmingham should abandon waste incineration. You could also identify the other reasons that were talked about by Brumgovner there, because Brumgovner doesn't actually indicate which reason is the most significant. Question 7. Text 3 gives more detail about recycling in UK cities than text 2 and 1. Give reasons why you think this is a suitable choice by the writer. So why is text 3 giving more detail? In this question, we need to consider the different text types that are being written. So what are the texts for? What are their purposes? And what format are they written in? We also need to consider perhaps who they are written by and why some organisations might want to include more detail than others. We need to give 2 reasons why we think that text 3 should have more detail than the other texts. So the student's written here that the purpose of text 1 is to discuss and the purpose of text 2 is to inform. So already we've identified the purposes of the text as being important. Text 3 needs to be more detailed than these as it aims to persuade and argue. So it needs to use detailed statistics in order to give the text credibility and make it more persuasive. So because text 1 is discussing, we don't really need a lot of detail in the discussion there. And text 2 doesn't need a lot of detail, it's just informing the reader. We don't need extra opinions and ideas there. Whereas text 3 is persuading and arguing. So there's lots of arguments being made, and these need to be supported with relevant evidence, such as statistics. So this makes the text a lot more persuasive. Brumgovner is trying to put across an argument, and he needs to justify this with detailed reasons. So that is one reason why adding more detail to text 3 is a suitable choice by the writer. Let's take a look at the second reason mentioned here. So text 3 is a web page from Birmingham Green Party. This is an official source from a political party, so needs to be detailed to give the party credibility. So we've identified the text type here, a web page and the author. So we've got Birmingham Green Party. How do we know this? Well, if we look at the text, we can see that in the top bar here, Birmingham Green Party has been mentioned. So because it is coming from this official source, it is really important for this political party to include details that are correct in order to give the party credibility. If they just included a few facts and tried to justify opinions using those, then it wouldn't give the party enough credibility. It wouldn't make the reader think that what they're saying is a good idea. So that is another reason why text 3 needs to be more detailed. A third reason that you could consider is that text 3 uses a lot of specialist vocabulary that needs to be explained. So for example, we have a circular economy waste policy. So they have to explain what this means because that's some specialist terminology that not a lot of people would understand. So they've explained that they should be promoting community sharing, reuse and recycling across the city. So there are 3 reasons why the text needs to be more detailed, and you could have any of those reasons. But make sure that you are fully explaining yourself and you are comparing with texts 2 and 1 in your answer. Question 8. Using text 1 and 2, compare the author's views on the practicality of recycling and compare 2 ways that these views have been conveyed. So in this question, we're looking only at text 1 and 2. We're not considering text 3. And we have to compare the author's views. So what are their perspectives? What do they think about the practicality of recycling? Do they agree with each other or do they disagree? And what points are they making to the reader? What opinions do they share? And then we need to compare 2 ways that these views have been conveyed. So when we're looking at ways that things have been conveyed, we want to look for any textual details, any sort of language techniques that are being used in the text. So the student has written that text 1 discusses the limited opportunity for circularity and recycling in the mass-produced clothing market and suggests that a focus on high fashion clothes would lead to the development of more sustainable clothing items. Similarly, text 2 focuses on the drawbacks of current recycling methods. but this time with regard to household waste rather than the fashion industry. In contrast to text 1, text 2 does not provide any suggestions for how the existing method can be improved. So here we have addressed the first part of the question. We are comparing the author's views in text 1 and 2. The student has used this key comparative word similarly to show that they are comparing. And they've explained what text 1 is discussing and what it suggests. And then they've explained that text 2 is similar to this because it focuses on the drawbacks of current recycling methods. So both of them suggest that there is a limited opportunity for recycling. There are drawbacks to the current recycling methods. However, but this time with regard to household waste rather than the fashion industry. So here we've used this comparative word but to compare, to identify a difference between the texts. So text 2 is talking about household waste, while text 1 is talking about the fashion industry. And in contrast has been used to provide a further comparison. So I tried to include these sort of comparative words to signify to the examiner that you are comparing the two texts. So in contrast to text 1, text 2 does not provide any suggestions for how the existing method can be improved. So text 2 is just explaining the problems, whereas text 1 offers some suggestions for improvement. So that summarises the author's views in a really effective way, identifying some of the similarities and differences between the sources. So we would get 2 marks for this explanation of the author's views. Next, we need a comparison of how the views have been conveyed, so what techniques have been used. And text 1 uses statistics and facts to persuade the reader to agree with its viewpoint, which contributes to its formal tone. On the other hand, text 2 adopts a more conversational tone in order to make them feel more involved in the topic. So here again we have a comparative phrase on the other hand, so that shows a difference. We've also identified how the views have been conveyed, so we've got statistics and facts in text 1 to persuade the reader. And we have a formal tone that has been created. Whereas in text 2, we have a more conversational tone. So we talked about the different tones in each of the texts. That is one way that the views have been conveyed. And we also have a few textual devices, some language techniques like statistics and facts that have been noted down. And then we've got a bit about the effect on the reader as well. So the reader is persuaded by text 1, whereas in text 2, they are trying to involve the reader in the topic. So when you get a question like this, think about the different views of the authors and identify some similarities and differences between them. And then you need to see how this has been conveyed. So try and find any language techniques that are being used, any facts or opinions, and the sort of tone and style that is being created in the text. Now, you might have noticed that the student has made a spelling mistake in the answer here. So instead of similarly, they've written similarly. Because it's clear what they mean, they wouldn't lose any marks for this. Remember that this is a reading exam, not a writing exam. You will lose marks for incorrect spellings in your writing exam, but so long as your meaning is clear throughout your reading exam, then any spelling mistakes will be okay. So don't worry too much about it, so long as it's clear what you mean. Question 9. Determine the styles of writing used in text 1 and 3. Select an example from both texts which demonstrates these writing styles. So when we are looking at styles of writing, we want to get the overall impression from the text. So we need to think about how formal the text is, and we need to think about the purpose of the text. Is the writer writing to inform you about something, or are they writing to persuade you to agree with a certain opinion? And we want to look at text 1 and 3 for this question to make sure that we're not mentioning text 2. And then we need to select an example from both texts. So we want to use some quotations from the text, and we want to also use possibly some language techniques, identify some of those in both texts to demonstrate these writing styles. So the student has identified that text 1 is informative. That is the correct style for text 1. Let's have a quick look at text 1 and see why it is informative. So throughout the text, we have different facts about the fashion items. So we've got an explanation about how some of these clothes are impossible to reuse, and this greenwashing is going on. So we've got loads of facts, statistics within the text. And we see that it is an article from The Guardian. So we know that this is a newspaper article, an online newspaper, so it's going to be informative to the reader. So it's written in an informative style, and this is shown by statistics. We could also say facts here, such as 40% leave the market again as landfill. So anything about facts, anything about statistics, or quotations from experts will show us that the text is informative. So that is a good example from the text for the second mark. The third mark comes from identifying that text 3 is a persuasive text. So let's have a look at the text and see what makes it persuasive. So we've got some opinions here that have been stated straight away. Birmingham City Council should feel ashamed of its record on recycling and waste management. So because we are explaining opinions, and then we've got a proposal at the bottom here, they're offering ideas to fix the problems. They need to be persuasive, and we've got some persuasive techniques that have been used in that text. So one persuasive technique is emotive language within the text, such as Birmingham City Council should feel ashamed of its record on recycling and waste management. And that ashamed there is quite an emotive word. It encourages the reader to feel strongly about the issue. So that is a really great example from the text to illustrate that it is a persuasive piece. You could also identify that text 1 is a formal text, or it's a discursive text, it's creating a discussion, and then you would provide a relevant example to support that. And for text 3, you could also identify that it is argumentative or a formal text, and then you would have to provide a relevant example to show that as well. So identify some relevant language techniques and grab some quotations from the text to support them. Question 10. Which of these texts is the most biased? Explain your selection using examples from text 1, 2 and 3. So in this question, we have to discuss all 3 texts, and we have to find examples from every single one of them. And we will get 4 marks for this question, so we need to be identifying which text is most biased correctly, and then giving a relevant explanation using these examples. So we need to give reasons using examples. So first things first, for this question we need to know what bias means. So bias means that the author has strong opinions about a topic. These opinions and prejudices are usually formed based on somebody's upbringing, their background, or any other motivations that they may have. So the most biased of the three texts will include a large number of opinions and ideas that are strongly in favour or against a specific thing. The least biased text will avoid giving any opinions, or it will give a balanced argument with multiple competing views on a topic. So which text is the most biased? Well, it is text 3. And identifying that will get you your first mark. Text 3 is the most biased as it uses strong emotive language like ashamed and pitiful to make the reader empathise with the writer's point of view. This is probably because the source is written by a biased author, a member of the Green Party. So we have explained why this text is the most biased. So it's written by a member of the Green Party who is likely to have strong opinions on this topic. If you're a member of the Green Party, then you're going to care about the environment because the Green Party has strong policies in favour of sustainability and progress environmentally. And we have examples from the text. So they've included this technique here, strong emotive language like ashamed and pitiful. And they have explained the effect of this on the reader. So this makes the reader empathise with the writer's point of view. So overall, this is a really great explanation for text 3, and you would get the second mark for that. Now we need to consider why the other two texts are less biased. So text 2 is less biased as it has a conversational tone created by the question and answer format, indicating curiosity about the subject rather than leaning one way or the other. The text implies that people who fail to recycle certain items are uneducated on recycling. They are unsure rather than lazy or evil. This balance treats both sides sympathetically rather than demonising people who are uneducated. So we've identified here that text 2 is less biased, and we know that text 1 is less biased than text 3 as well. So identifying that will help us to get that first mark there. Why is text 2 less biased? Well, we've identified the conversational tone created in the text. So we've got that question and answer format. And this is a form of evidence from the text. This is an example from the text. Even though there isn't a quotation used here, the student has explained the tone and the question and answer format, the techniques that have been used as examples. And this is a great explanation. So this question and answer format indicates some curiosity, and we have actually included another example using a quotation here. So people being unsure rather than lazy or evil. It's not trying to demonise people. It is a balanced text that treats people sympathetically. And then finally, we have an explanation of why text 1 is the least biased. So it uses quotes to give a balanced argument that supports both sides of the discussion. The text argues that there is a possibility of circularity in high fashion, but acknowledges it isn't always possible for mass-produced clothes. So we've identified some techniques used in text 1, some quotes that give a balanced argument. So it's not biased one way or the other, it is balanced. We've got opinions on both sides of the argument. And the text, we've got an explanation here of how the text gives this balanced argument. So it argues that there is a high possibility of circularity, so there's recycling, but it isn't always possible. So overall, we have a good explanation of why these texts are less biased, a good explanation for text 2 for the third mark, and for the fourth mark, a good explanation of text 1. So remember to look at the background of the sources and where they are coming from, as well as considering the text type when you're thinking about bias.